order. Anybody need to self-identify at this point? And I apologize, I'm going off my phone for the agenda, so I have to keep looking down. Anybody need to self-identify? I didn't think so. Okay. Okay. So you should have gotten a packet earlier this week, and maybe there was an update today. There are actually 2 sets of minutes that need approval. One is for the normal meeting we had back on February 26th. So let's do that one first. I need a motion to approve those minutes, and I need a second.
So moved.
Second.
Who was the second?
Michelle Sesteric.
Thank you.
Any questions or discussion or corrections for those minutes? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And then the next set of minutes was for our special meeting that we held on March 30th, and that was the one where we talked about extending the current contract and looking at updated timeline for the new fiscal year 21 contract. So can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
And second?
Second.
I got John for the second. Who was the motion? Sorry.
Carissa.
Carissa.
Carissa, yeah.
Thank you, Carissa.
Thank you. Any discussion or revisions? Okay, those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you for that.
And Dana, really quickly, did you see Michelle's note? Is she now on via phone?
She just hears music.
Oh,
So she's
I
on
don't-
hold by the host.
Is she in the waiting room?
Did she must have left again. Let me go let her back in. Sorry. You can.
thank you, John.
No worries.
Okay, so we need to talk about the committee updates. And I know the Program and Youth Committee met recently. So Jamie, I'm gonna have you do an update on what we talked about at that meeting, if you would.
I don't think anything's changed since our last full board meeting when I gave an update. So unless I've missed something, maybe you and Tara have had a conversation, but not had any changes to my knowledge.
Yeah, so just to refresh, we talked about the same thing we did with this group. The Program and Youth, we talked about the extension of the current contract, and we looked at the proposed budget. And I don't know, did this group see that? I don't recall.
No, the proposed budget for next fiscal year.
Correct. Okay, so that was one of the attachments, right, Tony?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, let me check that, but yes, so that will need to go to the web.
Okay, so we want to just take a quick look at that. And I know Liberty, I know you're on. Do you want to kind of walk us through briefly, similarly, like to the way you did with the Program and Youth?
Sure, yeah. I think it's on page 6 of the agenda packet. Does everybody have?
Can you see the screens that I'm sharing?
Yeah, it's up.
Yep.
It's up on the screen.
Okay. Okay, so this is the FY21 projected budget. For the revenue, the projected carryover from 2020. This is my guesstimate of what we're going to have carried over for FY20. These will change as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, and I have a better understanding of how the expenditures went. But right now, this is what I'm projecting. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
Tara's
Awesome.
doing double duty here.
There we go.
Okay, the projected allocations For this, I had to use what we received in FY20. I reached out to the state a couple of times in regards to the planning figures that they're normally able to provide us before I present this budget. But unfortunately, with the COVID and everything that's going on, they do not have those planning figures yet, which the planning figures are not actual, but it's a guide for us. So right now, I didn't have a choice but to use the same allocation amounts as we received in FY20. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, right here, we're looking at our obligations for the the subcontractor, well, Brighton Center and the new subcontractor. And this is all pretty much my best guess. For the ad, those should be good numbers with the exception of if our fringe increases or if our indirect increases. Our finance department has given us their first projections for FY21. For the operator, I used the amounts that were in the RFP for adult dislocated worker and youth. But what the RFP did not include were the rapid response dollars and the trade dollars. And it also did not include work experience that goes into direct service contract. So that's why these numbers are a little bit different than what was seen in the RFP. Below that, we have our set aside. The Jobs EQ, that's a computer software program that David uses. We've set aside the 6,000 for grow. Work experience, this is an estimated number because we don't know what our actual allocation is and we don't know what our actual carryover is going to be. But this is the 20% that we have to spend by the WEO law for youth. The educational career enhancement funds, that's the equivalent to the ITAs for youth. We put that back up to 100,000 this year, hoping that our funding stays the same. And then below that is the individual training accounts. And that's real similar to what we had in FY20. It's a little bit higher, but not much. And then overall, if nothing changes, which we know it will, but right now we have 16,000 that is unobligated. Okay, that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
So Liberty, the 16,000 that's unobligated, I'm just trying to track this here. The revenues include the carryover from the projected carryover from fiscal 20.
Right.
And those, I guess I'm just trying to see.
Okay, that's a good question. So the projected carryover and the projected allocations, those added together minus our obligations at this point in time.
Okay, so that 488, sorry, and Tara, if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, so if you add that 488, 167, and you add the 2,192,956.
Gotcha.
You get
that gives us the total available.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And then you take the total available minus our obligations, and we have about 16,000.
And the obligations are on the next slide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right. I was just trying to piece together the expenses and the revenues. That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to look at this in a different way later, in the PDF that I sent out with the handouts this afternoon, I don't know, around noon, you do have this all on one piece of paper. If you wanted to dive more into the details, that might that might make it a little bit easier. This is really just designed as a PowerPoint, so it fits on the screen. So that's why we wanted to make sure that you had both versions.
And relative to, I understand, Liberty, that, you know, it's very difficult to plug some numbers in here without feedback. And certainly with the facts on the ground, it's also a lot of questions. If we look back at 08 or 09, with other high unemployment, and obviously right now it's much higher than that, but maybe not as sustained, we'll see. Where did we see the allocations come in? Were those higher than they had been before? Like, is there any sort of trend we would expect from prior year allocations looking forward into 2021 that might help us look at, you know, directionally?
That's a great question. So from my knowledge, the youth, adult, and dislocated workers, those are based off of a formula. So yeah, as our unemployment rate is higher, we receive more funding. But right now, we don't have any idea of what COVID is doing to our unemployment rate. I have nothing from the state to go on. So I do imagine that our allocations will be higher as we're going to be serving more people than we have in prior years. But since I've been on board, I've been in this role for, I think this is my 3rd fiscal year. And what I've seen as a trend is as our unemployment rate decreases, our funding also decreases. So since FY18, I've noticed a gradual decline in our funding, but that was with our good unemployment rate. Now with COVID happening, I do expect us to receive more funding, but I have no idea how to calculate that because I have
Unfortunately, we don't know exactly which point in time they use for the calculation of that formula. So in terms of what time of year they're going to use to be able to calculate that. So depending on how sustained this layoff situation would be, that could play a role in exactly what the formula ends up being. Hopefully that's why they haven't sent us the numbers yet, is because they are, you know, potentially waiting to see what happens and then adjusting our funding accordingly. But unfortunately, we do not know that yet.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a great question, though.
Dana, we did have, certainly if anybody has any other questions on the budget, we did want, and this is my fault for not having this on the agenda, but we do have slides about the contract monitoring that was presented to the PY committee on the 14th. If you agree, we would love to be able to have the staff present those to you as well. I'm not sure what that was. I don't think that was me this time.
I think somebody was excited about that. That was like a right on. I don't know. No, that's fine. Before we move to business services, I don't know, Tony, if you want to take that, or who wants to take that.
Let's see.
Well, I can certainly talk about the youth. I think Jason wants to talk a little bit about the direct service in the Career Center. But the youth monitoring went very well. I want to say that they were really, you know, doing a great job. They were serving the amount they needed to be serving for this time of year. And I found no findings at all, no difficulties with the exception of Key Suite, which of course we cannot hold them accountable for. There was numerous issues with Key Suite. Actually, I asked them at one point in the last 6 months, how many issues have they reported to our cabinet CDO? And it was 100 and some. So, I mean, just the fact that they had reported that many said, you know, a lot. So I did recommend, the only recommendation I made was that they copy or they print rather their case notes once they put them in, so that there's no risk of them being lost. So, and now Jason may want to speak some on it.
Sure. So yes, contract monitoring. So I think looking at what we went through just with the adults, dislocated worker, business services. Tony already referred to youth. Similar to Tony's experience, we did not have any or didn't observe any findings. We did have some observations or issues that are specific items that could lead to findings that if they weren't addressed. But we did identify 3 program-related findings, or excuse me, observations, and 2 fiscal-related observations that we addressed immediately with the subcontractor. And in addition to discussing the items, a plan for resolution was in place. And I also wanted to mention that we had an actual on-site monitoring visit that occurred at the beginning of March. Thankfully, we got that out of the way before things got too crazy with COVID. But that really focused on the fiscal activity. So that allowed us to kind of look at not only a fiscal integrity and compliance perspective, but to make sure that the fiscal controls were in place as well from a WIOA standpoint. And then in addition to the program files, you hear us talking about key suite issues. We go over all of the contracts, make sure that there is administrative compliance overall, and there's also compliance with things like EEO and non-discrimination. And so all of those items, based on the monitoring process this go around, we felt were in compliance. I will just add one other thing, and that is we are expecting the Department for Workforce Investment to actually conduct their
Jason, we lost you. We lost audio.
Yeah.
Bill, how about now?
There you go. There you go.
Okay. I'm not sure where it cut off, so I'll just repeat the last statement. Is we're still expecting a state monitoring to take place starting the week of the 18th of May. That process tends to last at least a month, and thankfully it's not something that that happens on site. Is my audio gone again?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. I saw
I
Dana.
think somebody was reacting to the month,
Okay.
last
Yes.
month.
Yes, it's an interesting process. So we're in the midst right now of just gathering all of the supporting documentation and source documentation, make sure that we have it ready to upload or send to the state now. And so they typically take that amount of time, and there's a lot of back and forth that happens. And I won't bore you with the gory details, but I said all that to say that if there are any additional items that the state observes or identifies, we may come back to this group if there are amendments that need to happen to the subcontractor's monitoring report if it directly involves them. So just a heads up about that in the event that that happens. We're told that this go around will just be a technical assistance monitoring. So unless there are questions, that's all I had about monitoring.
Thank you all. And a lot of that we went over in the Program and Youth Committee, but I don't know if everyone that's on executive sits on the Program and Youth. So for some of us, it's repetitive, but for others, it's the first time. So I want to make sure we covered all that. So thank you. Andy, Business Services, any updates?
Thank you, Dana. We actually did not have a quorum, so we did not officially have a meeting. We had discussion about some of the programming, and really staff gave a very good overview of the adaptations that they're making to the way that we're providing services virtually, and just the huge shift that has occurred in the last month. What we were doing prior to the pandemic and what staff is doing now is almost a complete 180 in terms of the services provided, the type of services that are needed. So they walked through quite a bit in terms of what work is being done there. Also, we talked about partnerships with the cabinet, what's going on with respect to rapid response, so on and so forth. I think again, there was no action taken at the meeting because we did not have quorum, but one of the discussion items that started to distill around the idea of what is the WIB's role in ramping up and helping the ramp up of the economy or the reintroduction of activity in certain sectors. We're going to have a mismatch of folks that need workers, and we're going to have folks that are unemployed. So there was just some discussion about, do we want to create an ad hoc committee? You know, and I think it's a good thing for this maybe executive committee to talk about. The Business Services Committee was starting to talk about, is there an ad hoc group that we want to put together to make sure that we're providing the supports necessary to the business community as we begin the ramp up? And that's I don't know if there are other folks that were attending that meeting. If there's anything that they want to add, please do.
Andy, I was there. I felt like that definitely covered the conversation really well.
So there again, since we had no action, Tara, Jason, do you feel like we need to discuss this idea of an ad hoc committee if we need it? I kind of
Right.
feel like since there's a whole seismic shift and everything that's going on anyway, that should be the work of every committee to kind of work through how the world has changed and what our role is in it. So I'll just leave that for you all to talk about, and maybe we can follow up with staff, and Dana, maybe I can, you know, talk to you a little bit about, you know, what role you want the Business Services Committee to play in the ramp up.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay.
That is it, unless folks have other things they want to add to the report.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Andy.
Thank you.
John, MBO, I think we have a nomination for
We do. We've got a couple
Full
of things to
bid.
report there, but first I have to just mention I'm really impressed that Andy is still wearing a tie. I've seen him in his regular gear out and about before, so it's the first time I've seen him on a Zoom call. So I just want to
We're
give you props for keeping it real.
we're still full steam ahead here as an essential service. So it's really out of habit. So I appreciate it though.
We all need some sense of normalcy. So
Yeah, it's not that I'm missing a couple buttons on my shirt either.
So first, before we get to the nomination, a quick update in terms of membership. We've highlighted before. It's not Chad Day. Who am I? I'm blanking on my names now.
Chris Friedel.
Thank you. From the IBEW, who's really not been able to attend for many meetings. And we reviewed the legal language from WIOA on this, and we must have someone from labor. In fact, there's two categories for that. So the good news is that we've identified 3 potential organizations that could fulfill that requirement, and we've started making some contacts from the folks within the MBO committee. So hopefully we'll be able to close that loop before too long, because once we officially take Chris off the list, we will not be compliant in terms of the minimum 20%. And then when we do add his replacement, we are above the 20%, and that's still true if we add the nomination we're about to move into. So we're in fine shape from a requirement standpoint if we can correct that, and hopefully that can be done pretty quickly. So the one nomination is for Lisa Morris. She is with North American Stainless. So the benefit there is that we're talking about having a stronger connection to our outlying counties. And so that certainly fills that geographic diversity we've been trying to expand upon as well. So we've unanimously approved her nomination in committee, and I will present that to the full board at our next meeting for a vote.
Very good. Anything else, John?
Hey, John. Hey, John, it's Tara. Do you want to talk a little bit about our conversation about the distinction between and what we've learned about the distinction between the business percentages required for the full WIB versus
Sure.
committees? Thank you.
You bet. So there was some concern about the, the requirements that we have for the overall board, which is 51% or greater from business representation and greater than 20% from workforce. And the question or the concern was brought up about that we weren't meeting those thresholds at the committee level, but we reviewed the document in detail, and it does not appear to us that that is a requirement at the committee level, but strictly at the overall board level. Certainly from a diversity of perspective, it would be good to model that in all committees where possible, but there's nothing that is precluding us from finding the right people for these committees. So we are not out of compliance for that in any committee right now because it's not a requirement of a committee. Similarly, there's another requirement in that the committees shall, I think it was a shall, so must is how it reads, have non-board members who have the necessary expertise or experience for what we need to accomplish on that committee. Where we have sort of diverged from that requirement is that we have done a really good job. Well, we have a larger board than a lot of WIBs within Kentucky. And we have done a really good job of bringing the necessary expertise onto the board and getting them into these committees, that we don't feel like we lack the necessary expertise or experience for us to go about the missions of these committees. So we think the language of that may be, I don't want to say incorrect, that may be too strong of a word, but somewhat misapplied to the way that our WIB is structured.
So John, this is Jamie. Is there any cap on the number of people that we can have on the board in segments or committees?
No, there's no cap whatsoever. Just realize that as we add people in one category, it changes the percentages of the representation in the other categories. So in general, we're really healthy if we are adding workforce and business at an almost equivalent rate or slightly more business. It's when we are too government top heavy that it's putting pressure on our percentages from the those two categories that do have a requirement.
Yeah, and I only bring that up because in my experience, two different WIB boards, I can't recall quorum issues. I don't want to say ever, but I'm going to say ever coming up. Here in Kentucky, it's every meeting I have, every committee meeting I have, every board meeting I have. I mean, it's just odd to be in two different, WIB boards and never have it discussed, and then come here and it's discussed every time we have a meeting. There's got to be a better way to skin this cat. I mean, to discuss it every meeting and then have Tara taking people off the committee and adding them to committees so she can get quorum. That doesn't feel like we're doing something right. Or there's a different way to do it.
And Jamie, to your point, that's why we went back into the WIOA statute for the MBO meeting yesterday to talk about that. The staff had an idea that was having the 51% of business present for the Program and Youth Committee or any of the committees was a requirement, which is unfortunately why we had to go through all of that last week, just in an abundance of caution. But once we went back with MBO, reviewed all the statutes again, we will not have to do that in the future.
At least at the committee.
But Jamie, to your point, so what we will also review is just general attendance by individual members. So certainly those members that are on the board that are not consistent in their attendance, the question is whether we really want them on the board. So that is going, those who are not committed are certainly challenging our ability to meet quorum. And it seems as though it's a bit of a whack-a-mole, where in the past it was business services, that has improved. Now program and youth has had some quorum issues. So it's sort of a moving target, but I think the way to solve this is to make sure that our board members are engaged and understand the criticality of their participation, and that we also provide the ability to attend and join these sessions via video conference or other ways that enable them to be able to be present and be counted.
Yeah, I don't disagree with all that. I'm just wondering if we're interpreting the guidelines the best that we could, and I'll drop it at that. But the other thing I would say is that I don't know if you're going to continue what you did at the last meeting, Tara, but if you're having problem getting people to come, they were very understanding. But if I keep coming to a meeting and you just keep telling me to drop off because you need to make quorum, that's going to be people you're going to risk losing coming because they just keep coming and getting dropped off. So I'm not sure that's the best long range strategy.
Again, Jamie, we will not ever have to do that again now that we have reviewed the statute and determined that we do not need to meet that 51% for business. And I was very concerned about that, which is why we've reviewed it and confirmed that's not required. So definitely agree. We want to encourage engagement. Don't plan on doing that again. So absolutely.
Hey, real quick, guys, on this topic, because I kind of hear what Jamie's saying. If we review this and we shed the dead weight, for lack of a better term, the folks that aren't attending, the folks that aren't participating, do we feel okay if we have a smaller board? Would that make it easier to achieve quorum if we have the group of people, albeit smaller, that are on there are actually, again, participating, actively engaged? I mean, have we put any thought to, again, like shrinking the size of the board, and what would that impact be?
I guess rather than answer that question, Michelle, I would instead talk about how we've identified who those individuals are and looking at what are the circumstances that are causing them to not be as available. So I'll just take one person as an example, not that this person's guiltier than others, but it's how, I guess, an example of how we're going to look at this moving forward. So Dr. Poe is on the board and has missed all but one meeting in the past 10 plus months. So the question is, do we disinvite Dr. Poe, or do we figure out how to help him be better at attending? So that was a conversation that Tara had with him, and the challenge he was having was double duty as superintendent for Boone County Schools and the director for the Education Council. So with his retirement coming up for Boone County, he will have the capacity and has made the promise to attend. So I would first like to find ways to speak with these individuals and highlight the fact that this is a problem and help them figure out how do we solve this together, rather than trying to start whittling down and eliminating those with less than stellar attendance records. But that would certainly be the next course of action, is if you're not going to attend, we have to move on. And that's the case with Chris Friedel. He's always going to be a challenge to quorum because he's never attending.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is that when you, and I can bring this to a future meeting, when you do look at the number of required individuals from a variety of areas, all those shalls that John mentioned in terms of who must be on the board, you do get into a situation where when you have all those required individuals and then 51% of the board has to be from the business community, you kind of look at all the required people and then you double that. It gets to be a fairly large group pretty quickly just for comparison, the Southwest Ohio WIB has 50 people on the board. And not that I'm not saying that we need to be there. I think in general, smaller boards allow for more engagement and discussion, but I just mentioned it to provide some perspective of that. Unfortunately, we do have ourselves with all of the requirements. It would be challenging, I think, to minimize the number too much more than what it already is. I think, John,
Well,
do you
that's
think that's a fair
part
statement?
of what I was trying to say before is that, you know, the Tennessee WIB, we probably had 50 people on our board, which is probably why, and then committees did a lot of the work, but that's probably why we never had discussions about not having quorum either. So I think that's how a lot of the WIBs get around this constant discussion of we don't have quorum. So I think that is something to think about if we want to continue to fight this quorum issue.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
very
it.
good. Is that it, John?
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on to programming updates. Tara?
Yes, ma'am. I have three things for you all, and one of them unfortunately is not in the slides, but it is in the handout packet that I sent earlier today. And if we need more time for this, maybe we could do that. But I wanted to talk with you all about the schedule of meetings for fiscal year 21, because we would like to get all of the Outlook calendar invitations.
Tara, you're really hard to hear.
Oh no. Okay.
I think your hand was
Your
blocking
finger was
mic.
over the
Your
mic.
hand was blocking your mic.
Whoops. Okay. I'll try to keep my hands like this. So anyway, what I was saying was that we need to, I think, have the fiscal year 21 timeline blessed by the executive committee. And actually, I should know this, but I don't. Maybe if the WIB needs to vote on that schedule. What we propose as staff is that we keep the exact same formula of WIB meetings every other month, with committee meetings on the alternating months, and all the exact same, third Wednesday, second Tuesday, whatever they are, proposing the exact same continuation for fiscal year 21. And so wanted to bring, like I said, it's in your handout packet in a PDF format. Just bring that up to you all and see if you had any concerns about that. One thing I will note that is in that proposal of dates is our annual luncheon with awards that is typically held in September. Katie, Joe, and I have been discussing that event because obviously with all the COVID-19 things going on, we just don't know at this point if we would be able to have a gathering of that kind. Even in September, I mean, there are a lot of events that are being rescheduled for September right now. So, but it's just hard to say exactly what will come with all of that. And so I would just kind of call that one out as maybe more of a tentative at the moment. But other than that, would like to have some direction about how we get that approved so we can get all the calendar invitations out.
I don't know that in the past we've had to do that. I just remember getting this schedule. I don't know, Andy, if you chime in, what your recollection. We just got the schedule. I don't think we had to vote on that.
Yeah, I don't
Perfect.
remember ever approving the schedule of meetings.
Great. Okay. Well, then you at some point will be getting all of those invitations for the full WIB, and then whichever committees of which you are a part, you'll be getting those. And then we will make sure to add in the Zoom meeting details as a part of each of those meeting invitations. So it will all be one seamless thing. And then we talked about this a little bit at MBO also yesterday, that It kind of feels like every committee has a little bit of their own culture with regards to how they keep RSVPs and how people are supposed to respond. And so what I would like to see is once we send all of these out, sending that message out to everyone that if you are unsure, to mark it as tentative, and if you are definitely planning to attend, to mark it as accept. And then that way, rather than doing, to Jamie's point, all this tallying of quorum, do we have quorum, do we not? We'll just be able as a staff to look and see, okay, here's who accepted, this is how many people are coming. And I think that'll eliminate some additional communication that you might not love getting from the team about, hey, are you coming? Because we'll just be able to use the Outlook calendar system to handle that.
Tara, are people not responding that way? I guess I just made an assumption because I thought how I was responding, but I guess I was making an assumption. I guess everybody else was, but
I think
is that not happening?
I think a lot of people are, but not everybody. And then, we have enough people who are either accepting it and not coming, or not accepting it, but then arriving, that I just thought I would just mention it to say that we're just going to kind of talk about it, that, hey, this is how we're going to be tracking it moving forward, as opposed to berating people with, are you coming emails, which feels like a waste of time for those that are using the calendar system. Because I think most people use Outlook at this point, or some other calendar that allows them to interface with that accept, decline, or tentative structure. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much working, but I think if we just maybe talk about it a little bit, then it'll go really smoothly from here on out. The only other things I really wanted to share from the director's report point of view, I think, and this is an older slide, but just as a reminder that, our team, both our WIB staff and our contractors, have at Brighton Center, and really the entire one-stop community, CDO staff, veteran staff, OVR, everyone. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from our partners, both locally and statewide, about just really praising our team for their responsiveness. And I just wanted you all to know that, and they really have just changed so much about what they're doing, and they're doing an awesome job. And so I just want to make sure everybody was aware of those positive comments that we've gotten. With regard to timing, we of course have been doing a lot of work about internal structures with the monitoring, with the budget, with the RFP, but we also have been trying to work with our partners in the community to respond to this economic crisis that's come along with the health crisis. And one of the ways that we have done that, obviously, is we talked about with having virtual services for both job seekers and employers. And so there's been a lot of, positives, I think, in that regard. We've gotten a lot more Facebook likes and views since starting the Facebook Live events and other things. We have also had a number of people on the contract side with Brighton Center, and also Jason on our internal team, have gotten trained in unemployment insurance and have actually been taking calls from people trying to get them through this process. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the call, where we were waiting for people to come on, just more anecdotally, but the estimate now is well over 500,000 unemployment claims have been made in the Commonwealth since March 16th. And about 80% of those have been filled, if you will. So claim has been processed and that person has been paid, at least up to date with where they should be at the moment. The state is actually doing really more like 5 unemployment programs at the moment, where they normally would run just the normal one. the Commonwealth is actually the only state apparently to be taking advantage of every one of the federal options that they've made available. I just learned that today, and I thought that that was interesting. So the extension of unemployment for 13 additional weeks, the additional $600 per week that's coming from the federal government, and those checks have started going out. Also, the allowance of like contractors or self-employed people being able to qualify for unemployment. They're calling that PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And there's one other thing that now, of course, I can't recall, but basically the state has just tried to take advantage of all of that. But what that has meant is there are some delays. The primary reason that it looks like at the moment, the calls that Jason's taken, that he shared with our team, and just the calls that we're hearing from forwarded from other places, either they're really complex situations. So maybe they work in 2 different states, right? They work in Ohio part-time and Kentucky part-time, or they have their own business in Kentucky, but then they normally work in Ohio, or something, just out of the maybe quote unquote ordinary. Or they've had an issue where there was a delay and then they got frustrated and they filed again. And so the real message this week, you might have heard Lieutenant Governor Coleman speak a few days ago, I think it was Monday, during Governor Beshear's press conference at the normal 5 o'clock time. But the real push for this week is they're working with the staff on the call lines to try to catch up, especially dealing with people that have filed duplicate claims. And so I sent out an update to everybody, but just want to reiterate that if anybody asks you, sort of like number one is if you've got a delay, do not file again. Because anybody that files again, a second claim, that's putting an immediate red flag on their account, and it's not going to go anywhere until they call and talk to a real live person on the phone. And even though they have hired literally 1,000+ people to staff this call center, up from at one point it was 12 people, like earlier in the year, they have over 1,000 now. It's just not enough to deal with the number of people. So do not file again is the theme of the week, and the state is dealing with that. And I know so many of you are involved in one way or another, obviously, with this workforce community and with employees and with HR. And so and probably many of you have dealt with like e-claims, so maybe this doesn't necessarily matter as much, but don't file again is the theme. So we certainly are having constant interaction with the state and with partners like the chamber and Triad, in order to just make sure that those messages are as aligned as they could possibly be. So that's my update for you all.
Just a little comment, it's a little anecdotal, but for the Business Services Committee, when we are looking about what recovery looks like, and again, I think I agree with Andy, I think every committee should have some kind of ad hoc to address what it is that affects, that group. But with all that unemployment, many of my customers are expecting that when they do open back up, they will lose 20 to 30% of their employees that just will not come back.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be really interesting how this really plays out. I'm having meetings with some customers that are strategically planning to lose up to 40% of their people because they're paying, they're making enough money that they can afford to do that. So I think there are going to be some ripple effects on the backside that'll be, again, remain to be seen. But I thought I'd mention, I'm hearing a lot of that. So for business services, they're going to have a hard time, I think, when the recovery happens, because a lot of these employees, because Kentucky is being so aggressive and generous, they've got a lot of things. It's more than what they would make otherwise, frankly.
Right.
Michelle, I had a conference call this week there was about 6 major healthcare systems from across the United States. Top 5 concerns. One of those concerns is what you just said. They're expecting about anywhere from 20 to 30% of their staff to just not come back at this particular point in time. And then the other concern was many staff are making more on unemployment than they would actually working. And so there's no way they're coming back, because they're going to ride this wave out until they don't get that money anymore. So I think as things start to open up, you're still going to see a lot of people riding the unemployment, because honestly, they can make more now on unemployment with that extra $600 than they could before. So absolutely true.
Yeah. Hey, Jamie and Michelle, I would be really, I'd love to ask you as things do open up, and if you all could kind of continue to update us on that. You know, one of the things that we've heard from the cabinet is that once things are more open and you as employers are calling employees back, that, you know, technically you should be able to protest if somebody says, you know, no, I'm not coming. You know, that basically the idea of unemployment is that this is somebody who has lost their job due to no fault of their own. I was on a call at 2:00 today that Josh Benton and Muncie McNamara, who's the head of the UI effort in Frankfurt, and they, you know, I'm sure they understand that there's going to be people dealing with loopholes and stuff around that, but they were very insistent that employers should be able to protest if you feel like you've made accommodations, you know, for the health and safety, you know, in terms of social distancing, et cetera, and you say it's time to come back, that the employees should be doing that. And so I would love for you to be able to continue to update us on what that ends up actually looking like.
Yeah, I've got 63 people now that have filed for unemployment for a total liability for me of $480,063. Every single one of them I've got a job for. They've all still applied for unemployment though.
And did they get it?
Most of them are getting it.
Yeah, and when you start talking about the, you know, the labor wage, you know, people, you know, when they were making 13, 14 bucks an hour at 60% unemployment plus $600 a week plus the stimulus, they can bank that money and live off of it for an incredible amount of time. And I think, again, that's kind of what we'll see. And again, I brought it up more for our business partners because, you know, all these employers are really going to have an unexpected struggle. I think they expect everybody's going to return, and they're not.
So I guess from a business services committee perspective, this is an item we will keep on our radar for sure, and reach out to folks as we start to see openings. What are the trends? And Tara will have to reach out to your connections in Frankfurt to see what tools they have in place to, you know, react to that. And we'll keep everybody informed as we go through. It seems like the BSC is probably the most appropriate place to tackle that, unless there are other suggestions.
Yeah, and to your point, Andy, I think when it comes to on the other side, these folks have filed for unemployment and we're eligible, but how are you going to manage the ones that are working the system? Very, very clever. And it won't be easy to identify those folks and then try to get that revoked. There, you know what I mean?
So, you know, one of the things that was brought up in our discussion is, and Brent Cooper from the chamber talked about advocacy, and really when it comes to public policy, the folks that make and implement that public policy need to hear from employers. And I think that's kind of our role as a WIB, since we don't control the rules and the regulations as it relates to these programs, we're just supposed to administer them. I think that sending anecdotes and real data up the chain to Frankfurt is a good thing. And we can do that from a staff perspective with sending that information to Tara to give to her appropriate contacts at the cabinet. And then with our partnerships on the BSC and on the WIB with folks like the Chamber and Triad, they can help advocate to our legislature about some of those things as well, which might get some more attention. So I think if we'll just keep that conversation going. It seems like a very real issue that needs real attention.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, good discussion. Then thanks, Andy, for volunteering with your committee to keep that conversation going and live. Appreciate that. Tara, did you have anything else for your report? Can we move on to Katie Jo with development?
I am finished. Thank you, Dana.
Okay. Katie Jo, you have the floor.
Well, thanks. So I'm going to try to share my screen. We'll see if that works. Yes. So I've been working with Tara on just what kind of funding's out there that we could do and we could apply for. And we're looking at now, but then also come June, after those 13 weeks of unemployment runs through, after that $600 is no longer available in June or July, whenever that is. And so before you see a couple of things we've been working on. The first one though is a federal grant that we really haven't figured out we haven't mapped out where the WIB fits and corresponding also where the ad fits in that. We've had some of our partners approach us to help them with that application and be part of that process. As you see, it's due at the beginning of June. It's up to 5 years of funding, up to $500,000 each year. And it would be to help individuals coming out of substance abuse treatment facilities or in recovery get back into the workforce. So it's a huge grant, huge opportunity, and it would involve a lot of partners and a lot of people, different organizations just working through the process and each having their own specialty within the grant and the whole project. Again, as the WIB and as the ad, we really don't have a specific project or program we could do, but we can work throughout the whole thing, similar to what we do for the Covington Housing Authority and the City Futures Job grant. So Tara, do you have anything on that one?
I would just say that because we know that the aftermath of the opioid epidemic and all those individuals that are coming out of incarceration, we know that we've been told and we know that that is a big problem with workforce. We know that those are the hard to employ individuals. Prior to the COVID-19 situation, we had a lot of conversations about really not being able to leave any person behind because we had so many jobs that had needed to be filled, and how do we make sure that we are connecting any possible person who wanted to be in the workforce with what they needed to remove barriers and to be able to participate. And so this is really a continuation of those conversations. We don't necessarily know yet. I would just emphasize that this is a prospective application. Katie Jo's just spent a little time trying to figure out. It specifically calls out WIBs as a potential partner. And so we're just looking to see what that might entail at this point.
So that's the first one I did. It does require us to be the main applicant, whoever that is, to have a certain certification, which is through the National Institute of Health, which we just got notified today that the ad, which since it's our fiscal agent, got approved for that certification. It's similar to our federal ID number or our DUNS number or our SAMS number. So it's just another federal number. So the ad was approved at that today. The next one is Duke Energy. Their community grant for workforce development is due on the 30th of this month. So next Thursday, we are working, in the past, we've used that for their Career Center capital campaign, which was great. This year we thought similar to that, along that lines, but not really about the capital campaign, but to retrofit our career centers, all the different ones, to make them ready when everything starts to ramp back up, including like signs on the floor where to stand. So you're 6 feet apart, sneeze guards, hand sanitizer stations, you name it. That's where we're thinking about physical wise, but then also how do we take our traditional business model of face-to-face interactions and make that more virtual. So everyone doesn't have to come into their career center to get the services they want or they need. We can do that similar to this through telecommunications, or we can do it Facebook Live thing, webinars, or just there's so many opportunities right now that we could use to provide our services that are a little bit different than the norm. So I think everything's going to be a little bit different from now on. We all realize that we can do all of our meetings through Zoom. And so I think some of our clients are going to be like, why can't I just Zoom into you or FaceTime into you or whatever. So that's the change. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing where it's physical and it's service, how we provide our services. The next one is discretionary funds, which we don't know how much the state has in discretionary funds. Previously, we've used that for the upgrade of the Innovation Center. We've used that for the marketing toolkit. We use discretionary funds for a ton of things, different unique things and innovative things. We know that we're going to need more staff. A lot of these unemployed or just maybe need to have a little bit more hand holding as we go through the process and as things start to ramp back up. And it's going to be a lot of staffing, which we would just look for that discretionary fund to bump up and increase our staffing at the Career Center. And as you approve the budget for fiscal year 2021, overall operator and direct services budget went down. So they're going to lose some staff. So we're trying to maintain our current staffing since we know we're going to have more people with the unemployment rate. The other thing is just the CARES Act. I mean, they approved one yesterday, an additional one. I haven't read through that one to see if there's anything that is really related to workforce that we can use or we can apply for or would benefit us and that we can send on and use with our employers. So those are our main things. And then as Tara mentioned, we talk about development, that's getting our name out. Throughout this whole process, we have upped our social media posts and we've been getting a lot more activity on our social media, which again, makes people know who we are. Before they only knew the Career Center. So now they're seeing another name and people are liking and following and all those fancy terms, which only helps us with our marketing and getting it out that people like, oh, we might want to fund them. So two-prong on that. Do you have anything to add to that, Tara?
I do not. Thank you.
Any questions for Katie Jo?
Great.
Okay, thank you. So let's move then on to the final item, which is the KPIs. Let's look at the fiscal KPIs first. And I think Liberty, are you going to take that?
I'm bringing it back up on my screen.
It is in your packet that was sent out as well.
There you go.
Okay, Tara, do we have one for March as a handout?
I have what you gave me. So this is the one that you gave me. If you want to pull up it on, you can share it on your screen if you'd like.
I don't know if I am tech savvy to do that.
Okay. Or if you want to email me, I can pull it up.
Can we
Can we go on to KPI?
Yeah, go on to the programmatic KPI.
Yep.
With Jason and David, and while they're doing that, that'd be great.
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay, can everyone hear me?
And I'm here. The cat stepped on my keyboard, and I'm afraid to push any buttons right now. So.
Oh, that's a new one.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, yeah, we were just going to tag team this. So in terms of KPIs, I think the overall takeaway from the Business Services Committee when they reviewed this information was, wow, what a difference a month makes in terms of unemployment rates, for example, which, based on this information, the latest unemployment rate that we had for the area was 3.6%. And we know, if you had had the opportunity to listen to Janet Harris' presentation this week on the workforce forecast, she's estimating up to 22% over the next couple weeks unemployment rate. And so that's going to be obviously a significant difference. And so looking through this information, we know that because things have shifted so drastically in the labor market, I just wanted to highlight a few things on this information. And one of the things I wanted to mention was, and I think both Tara and Katie Jo alluded to this in terms of the Facebook Live events. And I have to agree with both of them that they've been really great opportunities, not just to get the word out about the Career Center and the WIB and what's happening in the workforce ecosystem, but it's also providing those forums for job seekers to connect with employers. And so we're having those weekly events every Thursday at 9:30. And the business services team is doing a great job highlighting specific employers. And we're doing it in response, we're getting lots of views during the live event, but then hundreds of views after that live event. So that's really great in terms of that ability to stay connected between the job seekers and the employers. The other thing I want to highlight on this, and I don't know, Tara, if you're able to scroll down on the KPI form a little bit. Awesome. Thank you. The rapid response assistance information. So rapid response, that's our strategy designed to respond to layoffs and company closures. Traditionally, we would do that in a live in-person format. We know that this, because of the climate that we're in now, we're doing that more virtually. And it typically is initiated by what's called a WARN, or a worker adjustment retraining notification letter that happens when a company announces a layoff. And so we've seen several of those warrants come through for companies like Embassy Suites and HMS Host and Groupon, to name a few. But the majority of those letters we've received have indicated from the employer that they're planning to bring those individuals back to work as early as possible. And so in terms of rapid response events, a lot of the employers that we've been working with so far, in terms of those larger layoffs, are hesitant to hold those virtual events for the employees, because it's the employer's desire, as some of you, Michelle and Jamie, expressed earlier, it's their desire to bring their employees back when they have the earliest opportunity. So more to come on that. One of the things that we touched on at the Business Services Committee in terms of this document was we're going to have some companion data to go along with this information at the next Business Services Committee to really better reflect the current labor market conditions since COVID-19. And so stay tuned for more of that information. But myself and David and Tara will be working on that information or submitting it to Tara for approval. David, did you have anything to add?
Just the county numbers literally will be out tomorrow from KY Stats. Statewide, the unemployment's 5.7% at the end of March, 4.5% for the country. That's going to go up. I mean, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah.
And otherwise, on the business service on the KPI, it was trucking along at its regular rate through March. And I'm pretty sure that business contacts are still going to go up, probably more than the average rate, because we're having extra employer contacts these days.
That's all I have.
Yep, that's all I've got.
Great. Any questions before we go back to Liberty?
Okay,
All right.
I'm gonna share this document, and I'll take hopefully just a second. Here we go. And I might have to move it around a little bit for you, Liberty.
That's okay. So in the upper left corner, it just shows us where we are, point in time. This report's for March of 2020, which is 75% of the fiscal year. And then Tara, if you could scroll down to the bottom right for us, a little further right. There we go. So we can see the percentages. So at this point in time, the ad, we've expended 72%. The subcontractor, direct services and operator, they're at 57%. Everything else is pretty straightforward. The ITAs and the educational career enhancement funds are low, but that's a lot due to the COVID. And there's not been a lot of, there's been a few ITAs that have come through, but not very many for online learning. And overall, we're 53% expended at this point in time. That's it.
I'm a little surprised, and maybe GROW is expended differently based on the chamber's fiscal year, but if we're 75% of the way through, I'm surprised we've only spent 25%.
I'm glad you pointed that out. We've actually paid that, but the way our finance department is invoicing that, they're expensing it over time.
Okay.
So we're
actually.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Liberty.
We're actually at 100%. Our finance department just haven't put it in to our accounting system yet. So they've put it into a prepaid account. They're expensing it.
So so realistically, our total obligations is actually overall higher than 53% based on that. It's just how this, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
no,
there's
that
just
helps. Thank you.
A lag time of when things show up on our revenue and expense reports, and that's what I use to create this report.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, the ITAs make sense because a lot of that was like on-site learning, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I think, do we anticipate as the approved providers that we have become more prepared to offer online? Do we anticipate seeing those dollars being used between now and June? I'm just asking, I don't know.
Jason, do you have any?
Or maybe not.
I don't know.
Or maybe not till it may not be till December. I don't know. I don't know what the projection is.
In terms of the training providers?
In terms of the ITAs.
Okay.
So, I mean, it makes sense because a lot of the providers that we have are like in-person trainings versus online. So I was just curious if any of those providers were ramping up any online things that they hadn't done before.
So many of them are, and we've been in communication with the one of the representatives at the state level who oversees the eligible training provider list, and just inquiring about can we augment or just update their existing applications for their programs to make it a more streamlined process for the schools. So that individuals can change their training format from in-person to online. And the response that we've gotten so far from them is in Frankfurt is that they're going to require a separate application for each program, even if it's the same exact program, but shifting from an in-person to an online format. So not exactly the ideal response that we were hoping for. But at the same time, at least we know and we can instruct and encourage the schools to submit their applications quickly. So Gateway, for example, and is really one of the larger ones that I'm seeing in their training requests that come across to us. But then some of the other schools like MedCerts and others, even really the proprietary schools, seem to be fairly responsive in terms of wanting to submit their applications as quickly as possible. But it's the larger schools like Gateway, NKU, it's going to take them a little bit more time to really resubmit some of those applications. So one of the things that Tara had talked to me about recently was for our next board meeting to have Brighton Center share an update on how many people have been impacted from a training perspective. And so I thought that was a really good idea, that we could kind of share those specifics and make sure that Brighton covers that during their provider update at the board meeting. And if you all are okay with that, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, okay. No, that's helpful. I just, I'm sure that's the case across the country with other WIBs, and particularly with WIOA dollars, ITA not being spent. So, I don't anticipate necessarily any pushback from the state because everybody's experiencing it. I was just curious if the providers were doing anything different in response. So thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Any other questions about the